Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I'm excited. I have the distinct pleasure of getting an opportunity to bring on two of the most esteemed members of the Your Black World team to have a really important conversation about Sandra Bland, the young lady in Texas who died in police custody. The police are saying that she hanged herself, but a lot of people are starting to question that story. And then recently there was video released of her arrest, her initial interaction with the officer, which was disturbing to say the least. And before I dig into that, I want to first greet my two colleagues. Miss on one side of me, or on one side, you'll see Miss Yvette Carnell from BreakingBrown.com. How you doing today, Yvette?
Good. How about you, boys?
I'm doing really well. And we also have my man, Mr. Benjamin Dixon, who's ready to. Looks like he's ready to spit in the mic. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, boys. How's it going?
Doing really well. And by the way, everybody, Ben's website is the benjamindixonshow.com, correct? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So I'll start with you, Yvette. Yvette, you've been very outspoken about what happened with Sandra Bland. So I'll just start, let you kick off in terms of telling me, what are some of your initial thoughts in terms of just what happened with this young lady and just the sheer audacity or the sheer insanity, if you will, of her ending up dead after this minor traffic violation.
Well, it's funny. My friend Pascal called me last night, and he was like, you haven't seen the Sandra Bland video yet, have you? It just came out, and I was like, no. I was like, I haven't. And my first question was, is it gonna make me upset? That was my initial question, and he was like, oh, you're gonna be pissed. And and that assessment remained true because what happened, what I was actually expecting, what I had kind of steeled myself for was to watch her kind of maybe become belligerent. And not to say that she didn't have a
Mm,
right to become belligerent, but that's kind of what I thought may have led to the arrest and the officer got all caught up. What I saw in that video was something very different. The woman, although she's annoyed, as most people are when they get pulled over by the cops, she maintained her cool throughout. And it was the cop who decided, you know what? I'm going to ask you a question just to kind of needle you and play with you. And when you answer that question in a way that I don't like, when you answer that question with like this sort of self assuredness as opposed to this meekness that I think I deserve, I'm going to drag your black self out of that car and I'm going to take you to jail. Why? Because I can. And that's how Sandra Bland ended up dead. And I think that's what has infuriated me and has infuriated so many other black people.
mm. Ben, what did you think? Did you see that video of her interaction with the officer?
Yeah. So I saw the video, and you know what? I already knew exactly what I was going to see, and this police officer didn't disappoint. I knew because of so many times we see this happening. Police officers and troopers or highway patrolmen, whoever, they have the ability to provoke a situation. They have the ability to escalate a situation, and I already knew, that he at some point allowed this to escalate and that he was a provocateur. So when I watched the video, it was just like clockwork. You could see him setting her up with questions, like asking her, what's wrong? You seem irritated. Well, how else are we supposed to be when we get pulled over by the police? Who isn't irritated? Was she supposed to pat him on the back and apologize for making his day so difficult? Of course she's irritated. But he was asking that just as a means of setting her up so that he can get the response that he wanted to get himself angry. And I knew that going in because we've seen this over and over and over again. We saw it with just even without not even just police officers, but we see people provoking situations with Trayvon Martin. That entire situation should not have even existed, except someone felt they had the right to instigate and provoke and escalate. But we should have a higher standard, and that's the problem. We don't have a higher standard for our police officers. We allow them to get out there with their big egos and instigate and escalate when they should be de-escalating at all times.
Mm. So, Yvette, I'm curious. Did you notice how on the video they actually had another traffic stop, a previous stop, where
Yes.
people watching this, they were like thinking, okay, so this must be Sandra in this car, but it wasn't, right? The cop was really polite, like, hey,
I
so
thought so initially too. I was like,
you,
what's the problem with this video? This is
right,
fine.
right.
Right.
You go to school, what you studying? I mean, he was very friendly, and it was the same officer, right? What was it, the same officer? So,
Yes.
Same as
so do you think
Mhm.
that there was a deliberate effort by the police department to put that first video in there to kind of give a I guess a control in experiments they have a control group and then the experimental group, right? To give kind of a measure of, okay, this is how he normally interacts with people. So you can see this before you see this thing with Sandra. So you can maybe come to the conclusion that it was Sandra's attitude that brought this out of him as opposed to his attitude. Do you think that there was a reason they did that, or do you think it was just on there just coincidental?
Well, I would say that if it was a reason, it backfired, because what it showed is that he treated this first woman like she was a citizen who does actually pay his salary. He was there to protect and serve her. It was clear how he viewed himself in relation to the woman in that first car. And when you juxtapose that against Sandra Bland, it's a totally different cop. I mean, the one point in this video when this dude says, he asks her a question, "Are you upset?" Which is a question that you're just kind of playing with somebody. You're just kind of messing with them. When somebody asks you that and you know they're pissed and you know why they're pissed, you're just messing with them. You're instigating an argument, right? But then after that, he says, after she answers the question, this dude says, "Are you done?" That is the question. I don't care if you're in a romantic relationship or if you're in an employment situation. When somebody asks you that, you know that question is intended to get a rise out of you. And that's what he did. He was just pissed. He really wanted the woman to jump out the car and do something so he could taser her. So he asked her this question, and then she you can tell that she's annoyed, but she doesn't give him enough. She doesn't give him enough to do what he wants to do, which is to pull her out of that car. So then he asked her a question, and the most inane, ridiculous question. Well, can you put your cigarette out for me? Huh? Like, we're at the end of a traffic stop. I'm smoking because I'm stressed. That's allowed. And you're going to ask me to put it out? And then she asks him a question. And this is why Black media is so important. She doesn't refuse to put the cigarette out. She asks him, "Why do I have to put out a cigarette in my own car?" Everybody else is reporting that this happened because she refused to put out a cigarette. She didn't refuse to do anything. She asked a question, and this cop went from 0 to 100 and yanked her out the car for asking a question. Why? Because this cop felt like this woman didn't have any rights that he was bound to respect, and that's how Sandra Bland died right there.
So Ben, I guess the first question I want to ask you is, um, Yvette just said this is how Sandra Bland died right there. Do you think that it is an unfair leap in logic to say that this cop is responsible for her death because he locked her up? I mean, how much responsibility does the arresting officer deserve in Sandra Bland's ultimate loss of life?
Yeah. So no matter how her life ended, this officer is 100% responsible for it because he created the entire situation. He instigated the problem. There was no problem. She was complying. She was doing what he said. She just wanted some type of explanation. Whenever I've gotten stopped and got told to get out of the car, I need to know why. Because I know once I get out of the security of my car, anything can happen. And the police officers, I guess by law, don't have to tell you why. And I guess it depends on what state you're in. But he created this. I don't think it's a huge leap of logic. There's a lot of people with blood on their hands in this situation, no matter how it ended. I think they're investigating this as a murder, and rightfully so. But whatever the story is, they are responsible because they allowed this guy to be on the force in the first place. This type of guy with this type of ego, with this type of inferiority complex, he's just trying to stretch his legs, trying to be a macho man or whatever's going on in his mind. He shouldn't have been on the police force in the first place. So the entire county, everyone who allowed this type of egomaniac to be in the force, they also have some responsibility in this. So yeah, I don't think it's a huge leap because they simply what he demonstrated in this video is that they could not handle someone who stood their ground. And if she took that same type of attitude, which she could have and she should have because she has a right to, there's nothing illegal about her attitude, right? If she took that into the precinct and into the jail, then they were even more infuriated with her. So I think they have to start connecting the dots and go from the very beginning on this.
So Yvette, if Sandra had been a white woman, I mean, do you think that she would have gotten the same reaction if she'd been irate about being pulled over, or do you think that it's a matter of the cop just having this attitude toward everybody, or do you think there was something about her being black that played a part in this? What do you think?
I'm not saying that white women don't get treated unfairly sometimes. I remember seeing a white woman in her little 5-finger toe shoes who didn't hear a police officer and get thrown to the ground. But she really was not complying with the command, but she just couldn't hear it. You know what I mean? So she really was not compliant. She was jaywalking. So it just shows you how far these cops are going. You know, things always happen to black people first, and then they happen to everybody else. We're like the, you know, the little bird and the, you know,
The
what do
canary
they
in
say,
the
the little
mine.
bird down
Canary in the
there.
mine,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's who we are. So I'm not saying, but listen, there's no way to do, there's no way I do not believe that if Sandra Bland had been a blonde head, you know, a blue-eyed white woman in the car, that he would have dragged her out of the car for asking a question about why she had to put a cigarette out. I don't think he would have even asked her the question of to put her cigarette out. I think he was planning to arrest her anyway, because the thing is, why did you even ask her to put the cigarette out? Like I just don't see that happening. I don't see a white woman being arrested for, you know, basically answering the questions and knowing her rights. You know, this police officer has written people tickets before. He knows that people are annoyed, but at no point did Sandra Bland speak out of term. At no point did she yell at him. At no point did she raise her voice. At no point did she call him out of his name. She did exactly what she was supposed to do. But because she was annoyed and he felt like she didn't have a right to be annoyed, who are you to be annoyed? You know, this black woman in this car acts like she has a problem with me. Like, who is she? And I mean, she had every right to be annoyed. You pull her over, she was changing lanes to get out of your way because you were on her rear end. And then you give her a ticket, and then you're a smart ass all the way through, and then you drag her and arrest her. And so the point I keep trying to make to people, I don't think, you know, it's hard for me to believe that this woman committed suicide. But even if she did commit suicide, let's say for hypothetical reasons, you know, in a hypothetical situation, that's what happened. She got in there and she got depressed because she had a new job, and now she's arrested on a charge of assaulting a police officer. That's going to cost me a lot of money. I got to get money to get out of jail. That's a lot to be stressed out about. Now, let's say she did kill herself. They still killed her because she shouldn't have been there. She committed no crime. So you tried to ruin this woman's life. That's what you did. When you charge somebody with assaulting a police officer, dude, when you get a job nowadays, they run your credit. They run your background check. They run your criminal history. So it could have been that this woman said, my life is ruined. These people have ruined my life. You know what I mean? I don't even know if I'm going to get out of jail in time enough to get the job that I had promised. That's possible. Hypothetically, that's possible. But even if that happened, they did that to her. So I don't want people to get so caught up in the idea that, well, if she committed suicide, this is something that she did to herself. No, when you put people in certain circumstances and situations, suicide is just a consequence. So I don't think when I look at the evidence that we see so far, I don't think she killed herself. But even if she did, dude, they did that. They created the perfect circumstances for her to take her own life in that situation by arresting her for absolutely no reason.
Okay. So Ben, I want to ask you this. You know, Sandra, as the situation escalated, she wasn't quiet. She wasn't. She didn't. She wasn't the person that I think, say for example, you would have been. I think in that situation. I think even if you were outraged, I based on what I know about you, I think that you wouldn't have continuously yelled, continuously fought back, things like that. Not to say that that's
She didn't
a bad
yell.
thing. Well, she was pretty upset. I mean, once he got her
But she
out of the
never yelled.
car,
She never raised her voice. During the whole video, she never raised her voice. She was
actually,
upset.
no, actually, she, I think she did. Ben,
No,
did you?
she didn't yell until she started getting pulled out of the car when it got to that level. But when she was
Right,
in the
right,
car,
right.
question, she never yelled.
Right. So there was yelling. There was definitely, she was definitely upset. And again, not to say that there's anything wrong with being upset. I mean, there are things that upset us, right? But I'm asking, I guess I want to ask you, Ben, what would you say to those people who would say, look, you know, if you're dealing with a cop, like I know an attorney, Demario Solomon Simmons, who might say something like, look, there are ways you deal with the police that will protect your safety, keep you from getting locked up, things like that. What would you say to people who might say, look, you know, what was done to you was wrong. You shouldn't have been pulled over in the first place. But by continuously fighting back, because eventually I think a black officer, black female officer came on the scene, and it seemed like there were other officers that were like, okay, we got to get this woman under control, that kind of attitude. What would you say to people that would say, look, if she had just calmed down, it wouldn't have gotten as bad as it was getting? Because you know, even the officer did say something like, I was going to just give you a warning, but now it's gotten here, and we know what that's about, right? It's about ego, right? It's about him saying, look, oh, now that you've made me mad, now it's going to get worse for you because I'm the authority figure here and you're not obeying me the way I need you to obey me. But what would you say to those who would say, you know, look, I wouldn't have handled it the same way. If I'm getting arrested, even unjustly, I'm going to just let them put on the cuffs and put me in the car. I'm not going to scream and yell and holler and stuff like that. What would you say to
Yeah.
people who say that?
I'd say they're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. If you think that she should have just complied with his irate ego, then you're part of the problem, because you have to address this. Of course, we need to address this on a political scene. We need to there needs to be legislation. There are all kind of things that need to happen. But in that moment, how can you expect someone to, the worst thing in the world you could do is to put someone in an injustice who knows better, right? If you know better, and Sandra Bland knew better, she saw this unfolding. I can't say that I would react any differently, because once you ask a person to get out of the car for no reason at all, you've already escalated this to something that it doesn't have to be, right? And so she was faced with a situation where she knew what her rights, she knew what was going on, and this officer was losing his mind. There is no reason in the world that we as human beings, let alone American citizens, right, but as human beings, that we should be forced to comply with the egomaniacal rantings of a person who should never have had this authority in the first place. So anyone who's going around saying, sideline coaching after the fact, saying that, oh, she should have just complied, that's, to me, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's like blaming a person who's been raped. That's like blaming a person who's been victimized. That cop was the person that was wrong. He was wrong from the beginning. He was wrong. He escalated. He was beyond unprofessional. He was a provocateur. So instead of focusing on that, we need to focus on this cop and see why was he on this force in the first place. So anyone who comes with that, they are part of the problem, because now there's not going to be a solution, because you're looking at Sandra Bland and saying it was her fault. It was not her fault on any given day of the week. No matter how you cut it, no matter how you look at it, it was not her fault, because he should have just kept his mouth shut and given her the ticket. That's all he had to do, instead of asking those probing questions that he knew was going to instigate. Are you done? No, I'm not done. But I have to give it to her, right? Even when he said, are you done? She still didn't raise her voice. She said, you asked me and I told you. And then he didn't get what he wanted from her. That's what pisses me the hell off, boys, is people who can look at this and blame Sandra Bland. So anybody who blames Sandra Bland, they're part of the problem.
Mm. Okay, so Yvette, I want to ask you, this is my last question for each of you. So what do you think should be next? I mean, what do you think is going to happen next, and then what do you think should happen next in terms of making sure that justice is achieved in this case?
Well, I think what has to happen next, I think we have to have, I'm very curious in terms of how this investigation is going to turn out, but the thing is, even if we find out, I hope, if we find that she was murdered in her jail cell, that those officers who murdered her are charged and convicted of murder. But even if that doesn't happen, dude, there have to be some consequences for this arresting officer. There have to be some. I'm tired of this. Well, he can resign. He can find another job in another county. I think you have to find something to charge this guy with. And don't tell me that you can't, because you can find something to charge Negroes with every day of the week. Negroes who don't do anything get a charge with resisting arrest, and they shouldn't have even been arrested in the first place. So you can't tell me you can't find something to charge him with. But these people who do this, who create situations where people lose their lives, they have to go to jail. These people can't just be like, well, he resigned. This guy remember the guy who pulled a gun in McKinney, Texas on the teen crowd at the pool party? Well, he resigned, and now we've just kind of moved on, but somebody could have died. You create a situation. Nobody died in that situation. Somebody died in Sandra Bland's situation. But every day, these people create situations where citizens can lose their lives or lose their livelihoods, and nobody does anything. At best, you get a firing. If you're lucky, they get fired. And so what? They go to another county, another state, put in a, application, and, here they are back policing us again. And so I think, even if you have to have something where you ban these people for life from working in these professions, you don't need to be a police officer. You're working with a trigger hair here. You're ready to pop off. You don't need to be doing this. You don't need to be in this environment. And I think, and it goes back to Ben's point, dude. I hate that police always get the benefit of the doubt, because it's almost as if police can do 100 things wrong. A police officer can do 100 things wrong, and then everybody will still point to that one thing that, well, she could have done this better. Well, dude, like, what are you really, like, he has the responsibility. So I I really, really would like to see at some point, and I don't think it's going to happen because this is mostly happened to Black people, and people don't care about Black people. We have to keep pushing this. But I want to see something to where these guys get purged from the ranks. I saw someone suggest online that what they get paid, like the penalties, like the settlements that get paid to people who are victimized, or the families of people who are victimized, should come out of police officers' pensions. And I think that's true. I think if you get to retirement age and you realize you only have $200 a month because your pension had to pay off, so many of these settlements, then police officers will change. But they have to be impacted. They have to be impacted by what's happening. And a slap on the wrist or firing when you can just go work somewhere else, that's not good enough.
Okay, Ben, what do you think should happen next?
I think what happens, I'm in 100% agreement with Yvette. I just want to go one step further. I think that the reform that, let's say, for instance, Black Lives Matter, it's a political movement now. They're shutting down these presidential candidates and they're demanding things. One concession that they have to demand, and anyone who understands that the police overreach, they have an abuse of power, they see it going on. Anyone who sees this going on, we need to demand that there is a stricter, a more rigorous way of screening these police officers, because we can't allow, we have to stop allowing that kid that was bullied in school, or the bully in school who has a big ego and just has an inferiority complex, who wants to just go out and swing his baton so he can, let out all his pent up aggression. We have to keep these type of assholes from getting on forces in the first place, because we can't keep this. This is why it happens over and over and over again, is because we have these guys that they are not important in their homes, they're not important in their jobs, and so they're just waiting for a confrontation. And everybody listening, everybody watching this knows, somebody in your life that just is waiting for a chance to express all their pent up anger because I guess they're not important, and their wife doesn't respect, or I don't know what it is. But those type of people have to be screened out. They cannot be allowed to get a gun and a badge, because now not only a gun and a badge, but a police union behind them. They get so many protections that it's almost impossible to penalize them after the fact. So we have to catch them on the front end. I think we need to cut down on all these police officers that we have and pay the few good officers that might exist somewhere. The legendary good officers everyone always talks about. Fine, let's just cut it down to that few and pay them more, because they have all these guys running out here with these crazy egos. And as soon as anybody talks back to them, they lose their mind. But don't be a Black person and talk back, you can lose your life. And don't be a Black woman who talks back. They'll drag your ass out of the car and slam your head in the ground just so that they can put you in place, because how dare you try my authority, respect my authority. We got to catch these assholes before they even get in the force.
Wow. It's funny. My father was a cop for a while, and I do remember seeing guys that just had huge egos, who were clear sociopaths, and it was funny because they would just have this deep hunger for getting on the police force. Like that was just like a lifelong dream, and sometimes for these guys, if you want it that bad, you shouldn't have it. You don't need to be on the force if your whole dream, your whole life was to get a badge and a gun so you could go and tell people what to do. And I just think about one guy in particular who was just a complete maniac, and all he wanted was to be a cop. So I think there's definitely some accuracy to that theory that there are some cops who just a little bit off, and I think that in order to balance and to protect officers that seek to do the right thing, I think additional oversight is necessary. Just kind of getting rid of the culture of the blue wall and protecting cops no matter what horrible thing they do. Because again, there's a balance that has to be maintained. I don't think we can just say, oh, any cop who dies, he deserved it. Any cop who goes to jail, he deserves it. Any cop who gets in trouble, he deserves it. Because when we get in trouble, we do call the police. Until we start calling, maybe if there's a day where we can call the Black Panthers or the Nation of Islam to come to the house in a patrol car, then that might change. But right now, we call the cops like everybody else. So I think it's important to make sure we go in, and do surgery and not come in with a sledgehammer and assume every officer is trying to hurt somebody. But in this particular case, the video speaks for itself. It says a lot. If you want my opinion, she never should have been pulled over in the first place. I thought it was a petty reason to even to do this. And the sad thing about police interactions is that they can easily escalate into a situation where somebody's whole life is being ruined or somebody's being killed. Just being around an officer, an officer is like to me, the criminal justice system has become like a social virus. And like just like a virus, if you have some virus in your body, and I just breathe the same air as you, or I touch you one time, I could catch that virus, and that virus literally can spread to millions of people. You know what I mean? Just from that one little interaction. And I think that's what it is with cops, that just even talking to a police officer, having him ask you, why are you here? What are you doing? Or what's your name? That can turn into something that destroys somebody's life. The minute you don't obey, the minute you get into a some sort of confrontation. I mean, so I think that to me is the tragedy of it all, is that interacting with police should not be something that could be potentially deadly or life destroying. And that's the part that bothers me about all of this, and the tragedy of the suicide. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. I want to say thank you very much, you guys. I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk to you today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Everybody, this is Miss Yvette Carnell from breakingbrown.com. Go visit breakingbrown.com and give us some money. I think you still got that donation link up there, Vet?
Yes, donation is
Yeah.
always there.
Okay, give us some damn money. Quit being cheap. And this has been also Benjamin Dixon from thebenjamindixonshow.com. He doesn't have a donation button, but it's okay. He'll probably sell you something at some point, maybe a book or something. So when he sells,
Actually, I do have a book, so you go buy the book. There you
go. What's your book called?
God is not a Republican. I'm just taking it to conservative evangelicals, giving them hell.
God is not a Republican. I like that title. That's a good title. All right, so go buy his book. All right, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. I ain't here to sell you nothing. I'm not gonna be petty like these fools. But I'm playing. I'm playing. These are my homies. These are my absolute homies. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.